Hey, everybody. So my name is Len Brown, and I'm the senior manager of hip hop, R&B, and reggae at the Grammys. And I'll be the moderator for today's discussion, a day in the life and the A&R division edition. Excuse me. So obviously, as we may or may not know, I guess the role of an A&R has a rep for being the cool job in the music biz, as they work super close with artists and songwriters and producers on their music, and a plethora of other things. But what do A&Rs actually do, and how do some of these top execs in our business get to where they are today? I got two people that can help me answer that question. I'm Mike Weiss and Livia Piomelli. So I want to introduce you both, Mike and Livia. Please take it away. Introduce yourselves. Let us know what you do.
Cool. Yeah. Hey, everybody. I'm Mike Weiss. I am the VP of Music and head of A&R over here at UnitedMasters. With that, I co-run our full, essentially, label services business, our full kind of like top two tiers of artist divisions, and then oversee and run all A&R for UnitedMasters.
No, awesome, awesome. And Livia?
First of all, my last name. Thank you so much. That was the first ever my last name correct. So you get
I do my best. Thank you.
I'm the head of A&R at Maison Arts. We're a boutique. We work across all genres, and we work with artists, writers. Pretty much it.
Awesome, awesome. All right. So first off, I'll keep this very basic. In your two opinions, what is an A&R?
Olivia, you take it. You start us out.
That's a loaded question. Well, both Mike and I are two different A&Rs. I work on the publishing side, so I would say a little bit what I do is a little bit different than what Mike does. But on my end, a lot of what I do is finding talent, developing talent, and helping them grow. I think, there's a different conversation for each type of talent, right? So there's producers, and then there's songwriters, and then there's artists, and each silo kind of needs their own kind of development.
Yeah.
So I guess I would say my job as an A&R is to find and identify talent, and then also to be able to make sure I'm putting them in the right places to build their business.
Mhm. Oh, good. That sounds actually pretty awesome. And what about your end, Mike, on the UM side?
Yeah. So, it all kind of falls into the same realm. There's definitely differences between the record side and the publishing side. For me, the role of an A&R really is to discover great talent. There's really two essential sides to it. There's the pure kind of like signers who are there to discover artists. Those are ones that are scoping through, trying to discover everything on the internet, finding artists on Spotify or SoundCloud, finding things through Instagram, TikTok, whatever it may be, different research A&R tools, all that stuff, as well as relationships, finding artists, not as much these days at kind of like showcases or live performances, but it's still obviously you can find artists anywhere, but through relationships, managers, producers, writers, just a network of people. And so there's the discovery element, which I like to think of as kind of like the team that's curating the roster of the label as a whole.
Mhm.
And then there's the record making and development side of things. So as Livia said, there's the discovery, and then there's the development. And so the development will be pairing artists with producers and songwriters, finding who the right people are to work with those artists, being in the studio with them, helping them develop their sound. Some A&Rs can be more hands-on in the creative process, others less so. But really, we try and predict which artists are going to be the most successful, see the path for how they can get there, and then take the steps to get them there on the creative side.
Right on. So it's a little bit of gambling that goes with it too. It feels like, because sometimes you really don't know some of the talented people that you run across and whether or not they're actually going to pan out. But sometimes they exceed the expectations. So I feel that's kind of exhilarating in a sense.
Yeah, and I'll say to that, like it most certainly is gambling, in many ways. But you have to take shots. It's kind of like I like to compare it to the MLB, where it's like if you're a 300 hitter, you're a Hall of Famer. So if you're making 3 out of 10 bets correctly, that's pretty incredible. And like the expectation is that 1 out of 10 things is going to work, and that one thing pays for everything else. But fundamentally, we're going off a lot of gut instinct. There's the data to support all these things, but a lot of it really does come down to gut and instinct still.
Which I love. That makes sense. Well, I guess for me, how did you two both, want to know that you wanted to be in this music business, and how did you get your start?
That's a great question.
Kind of hard to hear you.
Yeah, Livia, kind of breaking up a little bit. I'm not sure if it's your AirPods or lack. Yeah, it's kind of a little shaky. It's all good.
It's like someone's popping bubble wrap.
Yeah, I used to love doing that.
We can't hear you at all now. There's no sound at all. Oh,
yeah.
Awesome.
There you go. Hey, we're back.
Let's go. We're back.
No more AirPods. Let's get it. All right.
I was saying I've done music my whole life. I've sang, played piano, but I never envisioned myself in the business. Mm-hmm. It was only after I took a course at Berkeley in Boston on legal aspects to the music business that I realized that I actually really enjoy kind of the back end side of things and what it takes to support people from a logistical side of things and a networking kind of dot connecting kind of way. And so that led me to meeting my first employer, Cara Diaguardi, at my school, and she hired me. And then from there, that's how I got introduced to publishing. I didn't even know what publishing was. I was not even aware that that was a thing. I had no clue. But I'm so glad I fell into it because I think it's one of the best jobs in the music business. And I really, really love it. It's so fun.
Awesome. How about yourself, Mike?
So how I got into A&R and if I knew I always wanted to do it is the question, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So for me, it's a small business. Everybody I feel like has fairly different path. For me, I'm third generation in the music industry. My dad is in the business. My grandfather was in the business. I've, never worked for either of them, but it was something that I was always raised with. My grandfather's brother was in the business. My dad's cousin, his other cousin's husband, like the whole family is music industry. So for me, it was something that I was always extremely passionate towards, and something that in some odd way, I kind of like identified as a part of who I was before I was ever really even in it. So from the time that I was 7 years old, 5 years old, I was listening to music through the lens of trying to be an A&R, kind of knowing what, to a degree from kind of secondhand, seeing what the industry was like. And then kind of getting into it, I was nervous at the beginning of is this something that I actually really love? I've put so much of my identity into knowing that I want to be in the music business one day that now that I'm starting in it, if it's not what I expect or not what I love, then who am I? Fortunately, that I didn't have to deal with that because I loved it instantly. But my plan was never really to be an A&R. I know a lot of people, that's kind of the initial starting point, and the goal is to be an A&R, and it's it's this position that's very much desired. For me, I was coming up in kind of when I was a teenager and all that stuff, the music industry was in a significant decline due to piracy. I was seeing the major label system be kind of hit really hard and heavy as a result of LimeWire and Napster, all that stuff. Yeah. And so the major labels were definitely not what they are now and what they were prior. And so for me, I decided that I wanted to go into management first as an area where there was real opportunity and where there was somewhere where I could get my hands dirty and really start working with artists from the ground up while I was still in college. So I started managing artists while I was in college, went to Maverick out in Los Angeles. Before it was Maverick, one of the companies there started managing artists, had some really good success with those artists that I started managing from a very early day in their career. And then, as I decided to transition out of management and figure out what I wanted to do, like UnitedMasters was a place that I knew Stout for a while, understood kind of like what his vision was, and I had a vision of how to operationalize that and how to build a real business around it and where the future of the music industry could go and where independence played a factor in that. And it was really him that was kind of like, you're an A&R guy, like this is what you've done as a manager. And it was what I did as a manager as well. Come in and do A&R for us, and you'll start there, but you could kind of touch every aspect of the business. And from there, it just like went from director of A&R to senior director to head of A&R to running the full kind of label business over the course of a couple of years. But that innate ability to kind of search for talent and to understand that star power, that appeal, like great record makers, is just like, I guess I've been blessed with to just, have that opportunity more so than anything and be able to seize it. So here I am, an A&R that didn't plan to be an A&R.
But look at it. Sometimes the best plans are the ones that you never really planned for. So obviously it all worked out for you as obviously as well as Livia. And I think it's fascinating just because of the fact that, it is a coveted job, but I feel like a lot of people really, I mean, especially the folks here, as well as the folks that are probably doing it freelance or whatever have you, I don't know if they know what are those tools to make a successful A&R. Like obviously it's going to vary per side of it, whether it's publishing, record, distribution, etc. But in your two cases, what do you think makes a successful A&R? What do you think is moving the needle? Obviously, besides that gut instinct that we discussed earlier, what are some other tools you feel like are pretty necessary for the job?
For sure. I mean, I think for me, one thing is realizing that music is a business. And as much as you want to separate the emotional side and the authenticity and the magic of music to business, it's still a business. So I think one thing that makes a great A&R is really understanding the finances behind how everything goes down. And as a publishing A&R, I work in development, and then I also work kind of with higher level talent. So it's having like a little bit of the two. So what makes money? If you're competing in top 40, what is going to make your company money? That's what makes you a great A&R. Are you going to bring something to the table that is a good investment? If I'm about to sign someone, right, like a producer or a songwriter who has no songs out and hasn't worked with anybody yet, it's how much am I going to spend on this client in order to make my money back? You have to be very strategic. Or it's like, okay, I want to sign Halsey or I want to sign Dua Lipa. How much money do I have to spend for it to be worth it for me to make my money back? And where do I find that money? And, all of these different components. So really having an understanding of that, I think, makes a great A&R. And then also being able to compartmentalize that and then have that gut instinct. Because I think for me, my biggest successes in my career have been things that I've bet on. And Len, you really nailed it on the head when you said what we do was gambling, because every day I feel like I'm a gambler. And like I'm addicted to the high of it, and there's high highs and there's low lows. And the fact of the matter is like I can sign someone based off of a demo that I heard in my car. And then a year and a half later, he has a record out with Jay-Z, and that's just the reality of our business. So, having a mix of like following that gut instinct, which I feel like, for example, when I signed this artist named Friday, who's an artist and a producer and writer.
Oh, yeah, I love him. Yeah.
When I signed him off of a demo I heard in my car. I heard his song and I was like, this is it. Like, he can do everything. He's an artist. He's a producer. He's a writer. He hustles. He works 24/7. Like, I don't care where he is in the world. I'll fly him where he needs to go. Like, doesn't matter where you are. Like, I need to work with you. And at the time, he didn't know anyone in LA. And he had literally like no connections to what was going on in the music industry. He was just an amazing talent. And literally a year and a half, maybe 2 years after working together, he was able to get these huge cuts. And that is like the gamble. So it's like being able to do that kind of gamble and win, but then also being able to look at like, okay, a Dua Lipa or a Halsey again, or like, you know, these bigger artists and say, okay, financially, is this a viable thing for us? And can we do it? And that also ties into having the relationships to do that in the first place, you know, knowing the right people, being at the right place at the right time, being confident and trusting your gut. Those are the key things, I would say.
Yeah, I agree 100% with everything that you said. You know, I'll add and expound upon some of it because I think you nailed it. Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, like this is our job as A&Rs is to understand what will be successful, not what we like. And hopefully the two can be one and the same, but it is not a requirement. And setting that aside, there is just a different perspective that we need to listen to music and we need to listen to artists through as an A&R. And I think a lot of that goes to a lot of the foundational stuff of, can you have the taste or tone to understand who the right artists are? It starts with looking at it through the right lens. Then to be a great A&R, it's, you know, on the development side, it's like, do you have that natural, or not on the discovery side, do you have that natural tact to just always be wanting to look for artists? Like if I have 10 potential candidates for a junior A&R position and they are, you know, they're just fresh out of college, may not have any experience, the thing that I'm looking for the most is like, how much are they just naturally spending their free time scouring through anything and everything that they possibly can to find and discover new artists. And so that's very much foundational for especially the early jobs in A&R. But then it comes down to, from being a great A&R, is do you have the vocabulary and the understanding of how to really make records? Do you understand not just how to make records, but do you have a Rolodex and the relationships to, you know, be able to get the right producers and writers in the room? It's like, it's identifying, you know, an artist has, or a songwriter is incredible at melody, and identifying their melody is amazing. This other songwriter is really great with lyrics. Their lyrics are a little bit darker and more moody, and they can be someone that fits with this artist. They wouldn't fit with that artist. How do we put the pieces of kind of like, you know, it's like creating a potion. And so it's putting all of the right pieces together and hoping that something really clicks. But it's a lot of that foresight and creativity on the A&R side of putting those pieces together. And then, you know, ultimately it's hustle, it's relationships. This is a huge relationship game in order to even get into the conversations where, you know, the challenge with A&R is I'll have certain, you know, certain A&Rs that, you know, you can work for 5 hours a year. And if in those 5 hours you close Brent Faiyaz, then that 5 hours a year is going to be a very lucrative year for you as an A&R. Or you can work 24/7 and not sign anything because nothing really fits. And, you know, you're kind of ass out. And that's kind of the whole gambling game of this whole thing. And just to that, like what I tell my team all the time is that we work as hard as we possibly can to put ourselves in position to get lucky. You know, we may give ourselves a 1 in 10 shot, 1 in 5 shot, 1 in 3 shot with an artist. Someone may have a 1 in a million shot, and they may be the ones that win. We just we can't control who wins, but we can control, you know, what our odds are and what our position is to get lucky.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And I love the way both of you put it. Well, first of all, shout out Friday. I got put onto him through like Edgar and Eddie and the Def Jam team. But second of all, I definitely felt you with that financial aspect of it, you know, because from what I understand, that T&E doesn't last forever. So it's kind of hard to schmooze every person that you think is a potential client without, you know, going bankrupt. So that's something that you just have to obviously be mindful of, as well as the actual overall financials of the business. But something that you touched on, Mike, that I thought we can expand on is some of those challenges that A&Rs face. And you didn't mention one of them, but what are some other ones that you've seen, whether it's to you or to your colleagues or other folks that you've witnessed, that you've seen that's been more prevalent these days than it hasn't been in the past?
Yeah, I mean, as far as challenges, like there's a slew of challenges in every area. So on the signing front, like there's challenges I'm sure that my A&Rs have where they'll really believe in an artist and I don't necessarily see the vision on it and we're not going to sign it. We'll have situations where, and to that, like I always tell my team, if you can't sell me on an artist, how can you sell a producer and writer on an artist? How can you sell the world on an artist? How can you sell fans on it if you can't sell me and I'm actively invested to want this artist to succeed? And so that's certainly a challenge. You know, we deal with artists, we deal with creatives. So there's artists that aren't going to want to work with producers, they're not going to want to work with writers. Oftentimes artists hate their best songs. And so they'll have situations where they make an incredible record that we all absolutely love and want to start lining up to plan for a big rollout in a single. And the artist is trying to shut it down at every step. The artist is trying to change mix notes to make it sound, you know, the way that the initial demo did, but it doesn't have any real, you know, connection to where it really should be. Artists don't want to work with different features, you know, not being able to get the right producers and writers, get those availabilities, having people cancel, like every element of what we do, you know, and also there's a challenge of putting your heart and soul into records that you fully believe in and they just don't work, you know? And so it's, all of those are challenges that, you know, a lot of it is we put that work in and we don't know if it's going to succeed or not until it comes out to the world. And we're relying on the marketing team and relying on the artists and their work ethic and management and so many other factors. But we just got to put our best foot forward and try and push things along. And, you know, every day there's new challenges. So it really varies.
Yeah.
That makes sense. How about you, Livia?
I think Mike really rounded it out. I think there's challenges on every front, right? You know, going back to network, it's always a challenge, you know, to find and meet new people that you can connect with. It's always a challenge to, you know, try and support your writers and your teams when there's different life things that happen. You know, you could sign someone for $500,000 and then a month later, you know, they get injured. It's like, you know, it being in sports, you know, and you can't work with them until they heal and maybe they don't want to do music anymore or whatever.
Yeah,
so there's a ton of challenges. I think for me personally, the biggest challenge has been, I mean, I started working in music at kind of the inception of streaming, I would say. I was already a couple years into music and then streaming happened.
Mm-hmm.
And I think for me, a big struggle as an A&R has been really navigating the business and navigating the financial side of the business with my producers and my songwriters, and making sure that when we're signing things at early stages, that there is an understanding and managed expectations around, you know, what does it mean to be working in music at an early stage, and realistically and financially, how is that going to look? And explaining to people, why is it that their royalties used to be, you know, 60, 70K a quarter with a Beyonce song, and now they're making hundreds of dollars on that same Beyonce song. So kind of navigating that has been a big challenge for me, and I think that has really led me to doing a lot of advocacy around it, because it feels like such a tumultuous time for creators around that. But I think we're moving up and up, and we're fighting the good fights, but it's definitely been challenging having conversations with clients and signings and, you know, different industry professionals on like, how do we navigate this?
Yeah, I can only imagine. Yeah, sorry, go ahead, Mike.
Just one thing to add on that you also made me think of, Livia, is that like a huge challenge now is it's so competitive. Like the signing of new artists is just crazy competitive. There's so much out there. There's so much to weed through. People are using a lot of the same metrics and everyone's kind of looking at a lot of the similar things. So when those things pop up and any of the indicators that are typically used to show signs of potential success, it becomes just a frenzy. And it's like, you know, we've had success by developing artists from the ground up, finding things we really believe in and developing. And that's been because we've been somewhat differentiated in that, because everyone's been going kind of off the data on the record side for a while. But it's just so hyper competitive right now. I mean, in the good elements of it, like the finance world is starting to pump money into the music industry, which means there's more labels, there's more business, there's more spend. But the virality of TikTok has made things super competitive extremely quickly. And here today, gone tomorrow. You don't know what's going to last. You're overpaying for things. It's the financial element, the business elements. It's competitive right now, super competitive.
I can only imagine, because like you said, since the advent of streaming, it kind of opened the door up a little bit more to everything, to obviously the pool of talent, to the folks that want to be a part of it. I can't tell you how many freelance A&Rs I've met in the last 5 years, but there's a plethora of them. They're everywhere, and not to mention the ones that obviously are in your positions. I can only imagine the stress and the strain that it kind of puts on the everyday. And I guess for me, it's kind of a couple things, because it's like, well, what is the day-to-day for an A&R, as well as how does that differ back in the physical product era versus the streaming era, compared to who knows what an era is next after this. I mean, it's anybody's guess at this point, but I just want to get from your opinion, since you both have been doing this for a bit, like, what are some of those things that you've noticed that's changed from when you started to what you're doing now, as from a day-to-day perspective?
Yeah, I mean, I'll say that the nature of discovery has changed significantly over the past 5 years. Like, there used to be a point 5 years ago where, like, I signed Lil Tecca and we did Ransom and Molly Girl here before he went over to Republic. And it was like the song was #1 on SoundCloud's new and hot charts when we started working with him.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if a song is number 87 on the new and hot charts on SoundCloud, everybody's already has reached out to that artist and is actively in conversation. Like, 5 years ago, you could find and discover an unsigned Roddy Ricch with real numbers, real fan base, real audience. You could find a Coi Leray, you could find, Bankroll Hayden. You could find all these artists through the traditional research channels, because they weren't so oversaturated. And now it's like, the second that a random TikToker in the UK influencer posts some singer-songwriter's song out of West Virginia, and it gets a spike in streaming from 300 streams in a day to 2,000, everybody's already reaching out on it. And so, because the point of the funnel has gone so far down funnel to where they're finding things so much earlier, the key metrics that actually indicate success are far beyond the point where they've already signed a deal, they've done everything that they've needed to do, and they already have had everyone talking to them for months by the time that those things actually happen. And so that leaves the research game now to be artists with virtually no fan base, no audience. They haven't built a groundswell or any real momentum. And then they have one viral TikTok moment or one viral Instagram Reels or Shorts or whatever it is that just pops up. And then everybody rushes to it. And then, because everybody's rushing to it, the price gets boosted. And then they're sitting there 2 months later with an artist that they've paid far too much for, where they need to completely develop the artist from scratch, build that organic groundswell, that fan base, and really start building a proper business around an artist. And they may not have the work ethic that they did, because they thought that this just comes this easily because of the viral moment. So all that to say that, like, it has moved significantly down funnel, the ability for research. Everyone has the same research tools. Everyone has the ability to find things super early. And so the only way now is like real proper artist development again, where it used to be just purchase into an artist that was already on a rocket ship, buy your way in, get through it, and be a part of the success. So that's the biggest thing that I've seen as of late, over the past couple of years.
Totally.
Right on.
I totally agree. I think for me, in my world, it's a little bit different, because I also work with writers and producers, so they're not as out and about, and so it's not as hyper competitive in that sense, where it's like they put something on and something goes up and whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I think, to Mike's point, like, that is also a struggle that I face, but I think what has really helped me stand out as an A&R, especially in the boutique space, is just traveling and meeting people in person, like non-stop, constantly being everywhere, meeting people in person, catching people early, meeting their teams early, and having that like real relationship with them, which obviously not everyone is able to do, right? But at the beginning of my career, when I first started working for Kara, I remember John Bellion had a record with Stormzy that had just came out, and it started doing really well. And I had a friend who was living in London at the time because I had gone to an international school, and she moved there. And I just hit her up and I said, hey, can I just like stay with you? And I'll just do a bunch of meetings while I'm in London. I'll stay for a month, stay with you. Like, we'll just like figure it out. I managed to scramble the money to get a ticket. I went to London. I stayed there for like a month and a half. And I still work with the people that I met on that trip today.
That's awesome.
And we've all kind of like leveled up, all of us, you know, which is so cool to see like almost 10 years later. But I took that risk and that bet on myself to meet people in the different places, because now they know me and they can hit me up on my cell phone and they don't feel any type of way about it. And it's not like just straight business. It's like, it's Liv, the homie. Like, it's Liv that I can call whenever I need to call her about some advice about something because some other A&R reached out. And like, how do I navigate that? And I think that's ultimately what's going to set people apart in this modern era where everyone is using AI and everyone is using the same metrics and everyone is using all of the same platforms behind their screens. It's like, who's going to show up at your show though? Who's going to be there? And I think that's the difference.
Right on. That human touch is actually still going to be important. I mean, that's what we are. We're creatures that require that. So that totally makes perfect sense. Shifting gears a bit, what were some of your favorite, or what is one of your favorite records that you got to be an A&R for? And give us a little bit of the backstory. You don't have to give us a lot, just a little bit.
Yeah, I'll say the thing that I guess, so I used to manage Labyrinth.
Yeah, he's dope.
And when we did all the records for Euphoria, you know, Mount Everest and All For Us, and you know, like this whole album that was kind of just like, he's a 100%er, and so a lot of it was really just him and I in the studio, and it was about me putting an infrastructure around him so that he could finish records, he could get things done, he could get them to a point where he was ready to ship, because it had been like 5 years since he had released music. That was a really special moment, especially knowing that, you know, a lot of those records were ones that I would just get access to his hard drive and just find things that he had made and that were like a 20-second snippet that was, you know, would turn into a huge record, like, you know, a forever record. And so that project was incredibly fun. For me, the Big X the Plug project right now is one that's really exciting. It's kind of like everything that we're doing on him, you know, knock on wood, has been working, putting the Texas record together. That was, you know, a guy on my team that found the record and sent him the beat and was with him in the studio, and X didn't want to do the record at all. He thought it was, you know, not right for him. He did it. We all loved it. We pushed on 7 different ways to handle the middle section of it, to rearrange the record. And it really just like helped really catapult and kick off his career. Awesome. So those are some of them.
Oh, fire. How about you, Liv?
Labyrinth. Just incredible. Wow. What an amazing one. But it's such a hard question. I like, as an A&R, so much of the joy that I get is from hearing like the day of the demo or the session, being like, yo, this session was so fire, and like I loved the person I was with, and like now we're best friends, and just like seeing that evolution. I really enjoy that. But I guess the most just spontaneous and record that was released that was so fast and easy, which never happened again in my career, was placing a song with Anita, the global artist Anita, who at the time was signed in Brazil, so people still didn't really know like what was going on with her. I had looked her up, saw some YouTube videos. I was like, this girl is a star. Like, I don't care what anyone says. I went to meet with her A&R, was playing him some songs. He was like, do you have any like Latin-leaning, Spanish-sounding songs? And I had just started working with this girl I was developing who was 17 at the time. and she had this song called Paquito. And I played that song, and he instantly WhatsApped Anita and was like, hey, Anita, this is a song that I found for you. She loved it. The next day, she cut it. The next week, Sway Lee jumped on it, and it ended up on her album, which ended up being Latin Grammy nominated for Best Latin Urban Album that year. Nice. And that was the easiest, that was the most simple cut I ever got as an A&R. It never happened again. But like, that's in that moment, I was like, wow, is this what being an A&R is? Is it like this easy all the time?
Light bulbs going off, fireworks everywhere.
I was like, I can do this. I can do it. I would say that was the most exciting. It was just like so like quick and back to back, that, and all of the accolades after, and just everything that Anita has accomplished now, and seeing that song being a trajectory of that was probably one of my favorites.
No, that's awesome. I love just hearing the joys from both your voices of just talking about this. You can tell that you really love it. And it's not just it's not just another job. So that's awesome. I love hearing these stories. Obviously, thank you, Mike and Liv. I appreciate both of y'all for even just going in depth with all this, because I'm sure a lot of the folks in attendance could definitely benefit from everything. I'm going to switch gears again to some Q&A. I know we've gotten some questions coming in through the chat. I'm just going to go in order just to kind of go through and get everybody answered. But one question from Sydney Myers is, what's the best way to land an internship in this field, and how can you network in a way that's not too pushy? Good question.
Cool.
Yeah, my first thing is, don't worry about being too pushy.
Yeah.
Be too pushy. Be annoying. Be someone that drives people crazy. Like, there's no downside to doing that. It's either oblivion or you're going to annoy someone, or they're going to like you. So oblivion is just as bad. But I feel like while you're in college, if you're still like, I used to throw shows in college. I used to promote events. I used to manage artists. Kind of anything that you can do, you can always get your hand in with artists or different people and kind of start getting experience in one way or the other. That's always a really good way. And then just, network, be pushy, blow people up, find ways to add value to other people, send them recommendations on just like who you like just bombard people. Like it doesn't matter.
Yeah, the added value part is huge. All of us are so busy and doing a million things. We're not just A&Rs. We also manage and handle teams. We handle back-end stuff. We're making sure a whole business is up and running. So we're not just listening to music all day long. We're also doing a whole other side of stuff that a lot of people don't see. So definitely, if you're able to add value to someone and just like be super clear, concise, helpful, that really just, it makes people want to help you. So, and don't worry about being too pushy. As long as you're kind and you're respectful, there's nothing wrong with being pushy.
Be pushy. Learn where the boundary is. You're only going to learn the boundary by crossing it every once in a while, and then be like, okay, I fucked up there. Let me rework this, but continue pushing.
Straight up.
Better to ask for forgiveness than for permission. I respect that. Another question from Natalie on is, as an undergrad with no experience in A&R, what are the first steps I could take to improve my resume and get an internship? Fair enough.
I feel like it's the same answer as the last one.
Yeah, pretty much everything that Mike said. Just do it. Just go for it. Manage people, find things. Go on LinkedIn. See who's working at what companies. Hit them up. Find it. Scrape their emails with Rocket Reach, y'all. There's tools. There's tools.
That's true. This one from Sam. What's your advice for somebody who doesn't live in a typical music city like LA or New York City and is trying to obtain an A&R music industry job? You tell them to recommend, or you recommend them to build independently, like with local talent, or do you expect them to move to those bigger cities? Like, what's your best advice?
I think it's really situational. It depends on what your skill sets are and where you can provide the most value. If they're, we've signed our biggest artist right now is out of Dallas. He was just like a small nothing when we signed him in Dallas. We signed artists out of Pine Bluff, Arkansas. We've signed artists out of, Batesville, Mississippi. We've signed artists out of absolutely nowhere. If you can find artists, I mean, ultimately, depending on genre, but ultimately, if it's more hip hop leaning and you need to build a groundswell, physical, on the ground, real community, in person, you can do that in your local city, in your local area, wherever you are, to build that momentum and get yourself in the game and a part of those initial conversations. And then my philosophy is that the same thing applies. It all starts with initial community building and groundswell, whether that community is based off of geographic location as to where you live, or whether that is based off of a community online on Discord channels or in different like servers or whatever that is. It's the same philosophy exists, and the location isn't going to dictate whether you can do it or not. I'd say build where you are and then grow from there.
Makes sense.
I mean, we're an internet-based global world, so it doesn't matter where you live. Most of the A&Rs that I know now since the pandemic, they don't even live in LA anymore. They've got their families in Texas and Florida. Like, it really doesn't matter where you are. But I would say if you're struggling financially, then you need to find a job in your town that involves music, whether it's working at a venue or working as a temp person for festivals that come through, or finding the record label that's in your town, or whatever it is, or even doing remote temp work for majors or indies that need that temp work, whether it's like admin work or whatever. Just getting your foot in the door and figuring it out, and then from there continuing to kind of just meet people, go on Instagram, see who's doing what, really kind of just try to connect as many dots.
Makes sense. Oh, it's good. Some good nuggets right there. This next one's from Jalen Weiss. What are some things that you do to balance your love for music and your understanding that this is a business? I like that
one. I'll say because I grew up in the industry, I've always listened to music through the lens of it as a business, which is odd, and definitely not the conventional way of doing it. So for me, it's like, it's all I really know. And I am not a good example of how to balance that.
That's fair. How about you, Liv?
It was definitely, I mean, what do I do? I think for me, that was like a lesson that I had to learn. I think as someone who initially didn't even think that they were going to be a business person and thought that they were only ever going to be a creative, to then come to the realization of like, oh my God, I'm a suit now, having that kind of transition was, it's more of like a realization than like, what are the things that you actively do? I think, you stay true to what you love, listen to the music you love listening to, go to the shows that you want to go to, and then setting boundaries for yourself. If you don't like listening to that specific artist, but they're going to be great, huge, whatever financially, maybe have your clients work with them, but you also don't have to work with stuff you don't like. There's so much music. Like, I don't listen to country, so I don't sign country. Does that mean that there's a moment where I'm not gonna like it? I mean, I watch Nashville and there's some songs on there that I love, like, don't get me wrong, but like, that's not my bag. Like, I'm great in like hip hop, R&B, pop. Like, those are the things I know I'm good at. Those are the things I know I'm passionate about. When I wake up in the morning, I'm like, all right, what am I doing today? Because it's like, I'm working on stuff that I love, but at the same time, I know it's gonna make money and I'm still gonna have my job. Like, I kind of try to make sure it fits both of those buckets. But I wouldn't say that there's like things that I do every day, like meditate or journal, or like, that like help me kind of balance those two things. I think it's just trying to, as much as you can, combine what you're passionate about with what makes money, just as much as you can.
Exactly. I mean, if you do what you love, it'll never feel like work. So I get it. Thank God we're in a business that we don't have to wear suits often either. So, no, Liv, Mike, thank you both. This has been great. I know, sorry, I'd love to get through the rest of these questions, but we are out of time. But you two have been amazing as far as answering all the questions and giving us a better insight as to what your day-to-day and what the life of an A&R is. So that way, a lot of the folks in attendance can actually get a better sense of it, and maybe they'll be the ones of tomorrow. So I pray and hope so. But no, thank you guys.
Thank you, Len. Thanks for having us.
No, thank you guys. Thank you, All Access. And yeah, take care, everybody.